Welcome to another episode of Sabine's Common Sense. I'm your host, Sabine, the Purpose Lawyer. Thank you for listening and thank you for helping me be on purpose. So, guys, today I was just sitting here thinking about how we're always looking at people, and you could tell me, maybe it's just me, but I think we are always looking at people who are highly successful, who we think that they always had it all together, right? We think that they've always been motivated. They've always known exactly what they wanted to do. They made all the right decisions, took all the right steps, and that's how they got to where they were. And if you're like me and you suffer from comparison syndrome, you know that you tend to look at yourself and say, how come I didn't do it all right like they did? And it's not necessarily that they had it all together, right? They may have just ended up at the right destination. For instance, I know someone who has a business that's worth $750 million. And I know someone who's close to them who said, you would have never known that this is where they would be. Like they didn't know at all what they wanted to do. And they come like a super long way. And we tend to look at those people and think that they had it from the jump. And so if you're one of those people who think that, you're lost or you're not exactly sure like where you want to go and or how you're going to get there, maybe sometimes you think that you may even be lazy. But that's not the case. You're not lazy. You're just picky with how you use your time, right? You're choosy about how you spend your time. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just about finding the thing, right? And sometimes you're just going to do the things that you can do at the moment until you find that thing. And so my next guest really had it all figured out. And just know that just because you have it all figured out, if you're one of those people, it doesn't mean that it's going to go according to plan. And that's okay, because guess what? She got there anyway. So it was not easy. It was a long road. And there was some challenges in there that would have probably made you want to quit. So I hope you guys enjoyed this interview as much as I did. Enjoy. Welcome, Bianca.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I haven't talked to you in like a while, I feel like.
Yes, it's been like forever. But
Yeah.
I've seen you've been doing wonderful things. So audience, if you guys don't know, this is Bianca Jordan. She is the Brazen Lawyer. Her firm is called Brazen Legal, and she knows all things immigration, but she also has an amazing story. So we're gonna get into that, right, Bianca?
Yeah, definitely. I'm always here to share my story, share my journey, especially right now as we're recording this. It's around the time when people find out like if they pass the bar or not.
Yeah.
And that is definitely a part of my story. But yeah, like what do you want to know specifically?
Yeah.
Because I
Right. So you're an attorney and you kind of always thought you may want to be an attorney. So tell me a little bit about how that idea came about for you.
Sure. So I've wanted to be an attorney since I was 12 years old. During I think seventh grade field trip,
Mhm.
I was 12 years old. I was really shy and quiet. I still kind of am. No one believes me though. And
Me too.
my seventh teacher wanted to challenge me, and she's like, "You can't just sit in the back of the bus. You have to actually like participate in this field trip. And if you don't, I'm going to dock your grade."
Mm,
And I was like a straight A student. I was not having it, so I'm like, "All right, fine. Like I'll do whatever. I'm not trying to have my grade docked."
right.
And we took a field trip to a courthouse in Boston, and she made me play the role of John Adams because we were reenacting the Boston Massacre, and he was
Mm,
the attorney that represented the soldiers. And he was the underdog. He didn't have a lot of experience, and he was representing everybody. He was representing the soldiers that everybody hated. And
mm-hmm.
he ended up, he won the case. And during this reenactment, it was the first time in life that I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I didn't mess up on my lines or
Wow.
anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, what? I think I could be a lawyer when I grow up. I didn't really know what an attorney did outside of what that field trip taught me, but I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I want to kind of be an attorney when I grow up to help people. And the rest is history. And I became an attorney when I grew
Wow.
up.
Wow. I wonder how come you didn't think I want to be an actress instead? Because you were basically
I
like playing
know
a role. Mm-hmm.
This is true too. Probably because again, I was like shy, quiet. I didn't really like public speaking, didn't like the public. So probably why that's probably why I didn't really think that.
Okay. And so you went on the fast track essentially to becoming a lawyer. What did you decide, you know, like exactly what school you wanted to go to, or was there like a journey within that?
No, I just wanted to go to law school. I didn't really care who accepted me. I just really wanted to go. I wasn't really picky about where I ended up going. I did end up going to the University of Massachusetts in Dartmouth.
Mm,
And actually, my mom told me about this school because the state just purchased a private law school in Massachusetts to become the first public law school in Massachusetts. And
mm.
my mom said, hey, you should look into applying to this school. So I did. And it was actually the last law school I applied to, and I really liked it, and I ended up going there.
Okay, wow. And so I know that you know you've always wanted to be a lawyer as long as you can remember now, right? And so how was it once you got out of law school? Was excuse me. Was that an easy transition into the legal field when you graduated?
Absolutely not. So I always say that first, the law school was the worst 3 years of my life. Like
Really? Mm.
I'm never doing that. Like you couldn't pay me enough to go back to law school. It was just really tough for me.
Mm.
Worst 3 years of my life. And I figured that after law school would be easier for me
Mhm.
because I did everything right throughout my whole life. I decided to be a lawyer at 12. I did, model UN and all that stuff in high school and college. I
Mhm.
didn't go on spring break. Like I focused on my studies and I did everything right. And, once I graduated from law school, took the bar, failed it by like 1.47 points. I
Oh
was
my god.
devastated.
Mhm.
Took the February bar, passed it, and then I couldn't find work. Like no one would hire me
Mhm.
because I just passed the bar. So they were like, "Well, you're barely an attorney. You have zero experience because law school doesn't count for anything apparently."
Right.
And then also at the same time being told that I'm overqualified because I'm an attorney, and prior to law school I got my MBA. So it's kind of
Mm.
like the worst of both worlds, I guess. So coming out of law school is very, very challenging for me. That particular summer, I remember applying to over 500 jobs all
Wow.
over the place. In Massachusetts, I applied for jobs in New York, Connecticut, the DMV. Anyone who had a legal position that I could do, I applied there. And I
Mhm.
actually ended up moving out of Massachusetts to the DMV for work. And as soon as we moved down there, my then boyfriend, now husband, we
Mhm.
moved down there. My job offer fell through, his job offer fell through, and we actually ended up temporarily homeless for a little while because
Wow.
no one would hire us. We ran through our savings, like it was not pretty at all. And we ended up coming back to Massachusetts because my husband's former boss said, if there's any way that we can get you back up here, things aren't the same since you left, like nothing's
Mm.
getting done. And my husband was like, I mean, if you're serious, we can get back up there like right now. So we moved back up to Massachusetts. So he was able to find a job, but I was still looking. And I would just continue to like volunteer at legal services because I wanted to
Mm.
make sure that my skills were still fresh. And also just to kind of see if maybe, a grant would open up for something and, maybe I could get a job.
Mhm.
And I just remember one day I had just volunteered helping someone with their case and I just loved it. I wasn't making any money, but I was just
Mhm.
happy doing what I went to school for, doing what I loved. And I
Mhm.
remember wanting to just treat myself to like a slice of pizza and a Pepsi. That whole summer, any extra money that I got from jobs here and there, I was paying bills. And I was like, I just want to treat myself to something. But something made me check my bank account before I did that. And so I
Mhm.
checked my bank account and saw that my bank had put a lien on my account. So I couldn't even afford a slice of pizza and a Pepsi.
Wow.
And
Wow.
at the time, we were living with one of my friends because again, nowhere to live. So one of my friends took us in. And so we're just living in her basement pretty much on like a full size bed in her basement. And I
Mhm.
remember driving back to her house and the sky started to change. It was sunny like it is here now. And then the closer I got to her house, the weather just started getting really bad. It was storming, it was raining. And I just parked in her driveway and just was crying my eyes out and just like,
Mhm.
God, like told me to be a lawyer when I was a little kid. I really believed that I was called to do this work. So I was just really mad at God. I'm like, you told me to do this. I did everything right. I went to
Right.
school. I wasn't on drugs or anything. I didn't do spring break. I did nothing fun. All I did was focus on becoming an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm doing it and nothing is working and I'm struggling. And I refuse to believe that this is what you want for me. And it's
Right.
like, what can I do? And I just like randomly just thought to myself, you know what? No one will hire me. I'll hire myself. And
Mm.
literally, like the rain stopped pouring, the sky started opening up. I just went inside and just went to my, little basement room and started my law office, and the rest
Oh
is
my
history.
God. Wow, that is some amazing story. You said a lot there. Um, one, like, what was that like? Just to go back a little bit, like coming out of school, having, I guess, 3 degrees, right? And then not having a place to live. Like, what kind of like emotional roller coaster is that? Because a lot of times they think once we have the title, like it's all like gravy, right? But how did that feel for you?
I felt like a failure. Like the
Mm,
day that I got sworn in as an attorney, my parents are just, super proud, like super proud Haitian parents. Like my
mm-hmm.
daughter's a lawyer, like super proud. The day that I got sworn in, I had maybe $20 left in my bank account, if that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just started getting food stamps because I literally had nothing. So here I am being sworn in as an attorney and I'm on food stamps. I have like $20 to my name. I felt like a failure while my
Mm-hmm.
parents are out here proud of me. I felt like nothing. I felt like this cannot be life. And I graduated from law school when the economy was still rebounding from the
Right.
recession, so yet like improved yet. So I felt like a failure that I had nothing. No one would hire me, and I felt kind of conned too because our generation we're told go to school, get that education, the job will be waiting for you on the other
Mm-hmm.
side.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. So I kind of felt like I have 6 figures in student loan debt for what exactly? So
Mm-hmm.
it was a very emotional time. I was frustrated. I was pissed. I was sad. I remember while I was getting sworn in, like crying, and everybody around me was like crying tears of like happiness. I was
Yeah.
crying tears of like I just felt so defeated, but I had to kind of like pretend that they were tears of like happiness and joy, and they weren't.
Wow. Bianca, I just want to thank you for telling your story and thinking and telling it so genuinely and so real because I have a very similar path, to yours as where I got out of law school at the same time in 2011 was when the economy was rebounding and had the same thing applied to places like, and I felt very defeated, very discouraged. I ended up taking a temporary position at a law firm for like 6 months, but I knew it was temporary going in. And then when I got out, I got pregnant with my daughter and I was like, okay, if I couldn't get a job before, how am I going to get a job now? And that's how I ended up starting my firm. But that emotional roller coaster, like you said, feeling like you've been duped, feeling like I just spent 3 years, 3 of the hardest years of my life pouring into this thing that I'm thinking that this is going to be the American dream. Like I'm like the top of the top. And you come out and it's like, nobody really cares, like you realize there are so many lawyers out there. And so thank you for
Yes.
that. Cause I think, attorneys, if there's anybody aspiring to be a lawyer out there or somebody who is, of course, this is not everybody's story, right? But there are there's a spectrum of how things can turn out. So you got to make sure that you really, really, really want to be an attorney if you're going to, take this journey. Is that how you feel about that?
Absolutely. I know a lot of people were like, I want to go to law school because I want to be rich. And I feel like, so I graduated in 2013, and I
Mm,
feel like people around that time, because of the crash,
mm,
they were kind of ditching getting an MBA and figuring, oh, I'll just go to law school because that's where the money is.
mm,
And like, no, there are a lot of lawyers that are broke, poor. There are lawyers I know that
mm,
barely make like 30, like mid 30s
mm,
salary. Like law school is not what it used to be. And then, I mean, and the profession too. And the other challenge is that we have to, as attorneys, we have to deal with, our competitors, things like the legal Zooms and
mm,
like the DIY things. And the ABA is so backwards and doesn't really allow us to really compete in that way. So
right,
it's not, so being an attorney is no longer the cash cow that people thought it was back in the day. So if you
right.
really want to become an attorney, you got to be prepared for the good, bad, and the ugly.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a challenge to sort of make your way. Like, of course, there are attorneys who make tons of money, but they work for it. So you don't think that you're just gonna come into this and then you're gonna just it's just gonna be smooth sailing. You're gonna definitely work for it. So that's why I say the passion has to be there more than the dollars, because if the passion's not there, then you're gonna feel, very sad. And I always tell people who ask me like about going to law school and things like that, why do you want to go, and I ask them to think about that and think about if the only way for you to find happiness is to go to law school and get that law degree, then you should definitely go. But if it's about money or anything else, see if there's other ways that you can achieve that first.
Definitely.
Yeah. So tell me about, so now you had this journey, right? And you finally open up your own firm. How did you feel in terms of confidence in just going out on your own, and what was that experience like?
So I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, obviously I'd interned at different places. So I knew going into law school that I wanted to have my own law firm. I do not have the temperament to work for others.
Mhm.
And I always knew I wanted to have my own law firm, but I wanted to work for another law firm first because, spoiler alert for those thinking of going to law school doesn't teach you how to lawyer. It teaches you how to think like one, but it doesn't teach you anything about like running a practice or anything like that.
Right.
So I wanted to work for someone first just to kind of get an idea of how things are run and also what people charge, because most of my experience with immigration has been in legal services where we don't charge people.
Okay.
So I had no idea like people, how much things cost, like how much a green card costs and things like that.
Mhm.
So I had to learn all of that stuff on my own. I'm still learning, but when I started, I didn't really have a choice. My back was up against the wall. I needed to just figure it out as I go. So I ended up just being in a position where like I'm building the boat as it's sinking because what other choice do I have?
Right. And a lot of people, when I tell them like that I started out of law school, pretty much, they're like, wow, that's really brave. And I'm like, interesting you think that, that it's really brave. But it is, because it's like you're betting on yourself. You're basically the person who's going to be writing that check or cutting that check, and you're basing your whole entire life on the fact that you are going to be successful at this. And I think it's awesome that you did that, that you were like, I'm going to do this regardless of what I'm facing. How did you get your first clients?
So my first clients, so once I decided that I was going to start my law firm, I ended up getting a job doing doc review.
Mhm.
And I only did it for one day. So the money that I made just working one day at doc review, I used it to build my own website and get business cards. So one day, I just was dropping my business cards everywhere, like at the library, just random places. And somebody found my business card and they hired me to be their attorney.
Wow.
So that was how I got my first clients. I didn't have any office space because I could barely, when I started my practice, I could barely afford my law license. That's how broke I was.
Okay.
I could barely afford to pay for my law license.
Mhm.
So I clearly had no business trying to get office space. So I had no office space. And I was just like, I'm a virtual law firm. I don't have an office. I bring the law to you. I kind of spun it in that way. And a lot of lawyers were like, you're not a real lawyer. You're not serious. How do you not have an office with a secretary?
No.
Like you're a like lawyer, I'm not gonna refer clients to you, whatever. And I was like, I bet. So I'll use social media. Like I don't need your referrals. So I kind of just like put myself out there, and people would be like, "Where are we meeting?" And I'm like, "We can meet at this room in the library." If it was somebody I knew, I'd meet them at their house. I just figured it out as I went along, and those first two clients, they referred me to people at their church, and it kind of just grew organically from that, with the conjunction of my being on social media as well.
Okay, that's awesome. What is doc review for people who don't know what that is, or maybe attorneys that are out there looking for work?
So doc review is document review, and it's usually when companies or law firms need people to review a large amount of information, whether it's for an upcoming trial or a deposition or something. So they'll hire people to go through the documents and to just review them, looking for things maybe to take out or point out and things like that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I did some doc review in my day when I first came out. I did a lot of per diem, so where attorneys couldn't handle their matters or they couldn't appear in court, I would be on like these lists where someone they would call this particular person and say, "Hey, I need an attorney to appear." So I was on the list. I would get a call. Can you do an appearance in this particular courthouse or what have you? And so I did that probably for like 2 years. I did a lot of that. In addition to in addition to telling my network like, hey, I'm in business, like, I have my own firm. And so one of my law school classmates to this day, I like whenever he calls me, I'm like, yes, whatever you need. He started to send me clients. And so he sent me a friend of his family, things like that. He's also another Haitian attorney, so we stick together. And so that's how like my sort of business got started through that. Taking on your first clients, how challenging was that? Did you feel like, okay, I can do this, I got this, or did you feel like, what the heck?
I felt like I got this. So my
Mm,
very first case as an attorney, it was a husband and wife applying for asylum.
mm,
And so it was very challenging for me early on in retrospect because I am like, I believe in people's sob stories, and
mm,
I ended up for them doing 2 asylum cases for the price of one.
mm.
And at the end of the day, I think I only ended up making like $800 from it because they were like, we really can't afford to pay you, or sorry.
Okay.
And I'm okay, but I still want to help you. And
Mm.
like, and my mom was like, no, you can't do this. Like, you cannot be poor helping the poor. Like, you got bills to pay. I'm not
Right.
helping you. Like, so like my mom had to sit me down too and be like, I get that you want to help these people, but you also need to make a living as well. So
Mhm.
that was really challenging for me because especially in law school, they always teach you like you're supposed to do like X amount of hours of pro bono work, and you're supposed to help, the people that can't afford stuff and whatever.
Mhm.
And my mom is like, okay, but like there are organizations that do that. That's a
Mhm.
challenge I still have. Like, I'm in year 7 of my law firm, and that's something that I still deal with. And one of
Okay.
my friends, he's always like, okay, are you Brazen Legal or are you Brazen Legal Aid? Because last I
Mm.
checked, you got bills to pay, you got people to pay. You cannot be just giving your services out there willy-nilly like that. So that was my biggest challenge. It wasn't even a confidence thing as far as can I do the work.
Mhm.
It was just really people telling me like, hey, I need your services, or fellow Haitian people being like, hey, I'm Haitian too, can you help me for free? Or
Right.
I know your mom, I know your dad, like help me. And me feeling like combination, well, I'm new, so I should discount my services or do it for free. And then combination, just not wanting to disappoint people and just wanting to take in as much money as possible, even if it ended up being like $800 for 2 asylum cases.
Yeah. Oh man, you're telling all the good stuff here, Bianca, because these are the things that new, especially attorneys, go through when we are taking on clients when we're starting new businesses. Because one, even if it's not a confidence issue, it's like the value issue, right? You feel like, well, I know this, I could just tell you, right? Or whether or not it takes you 10 hours or it takes you 3 hours, you're kind of like, oh, well, it only took me, but we don't realize what the value is that we're giving, like the time we're saving someone, the heartache, maybe the money that we're saving someone. And we paid to know this, right? We paid to know how to navigate these waters, and that's why we have to charge what we charge, right? And so there is that struggle, especially like coming from an immigrant family, like having that compassion, because I'm like the same, like I'm very compassionate, but after a while you realize, okay, I'm building something here. And then especially if you end up having employees, then they got to eat too, they got to get paid, so we have to like,
Exactly. Right.
yeah, we actually have to charge what we're worth. So that's cool. Um, so what are some misconceptions? So let's shift a little bit to talking about immigration law. What are some misconceptions that people have about immigration law?
I think the number one misconception is
Mm,
that immigration is just forms. Like it's just filling
mm,
out forms. You don't need a lawyer, you can figure it out. And that's not the case at all. And even if it was just forms, a
mm.
standard green card application packet has about 90 forms. And the
Wow.
questions are based on immigration law, which I think after tax law is the most complicated area of law in America, if not IP, but either way, it's like top 3 complicated areas of law. There are lawyers who have been practicing for longer than I have been practicing that are still confused about what I believe are like basic principles in immigration law. So never mind like a layman, someone who, you know, especially somebody who maybe English isn't their first language.
Right.
It's very complicated. And I've seen people, you know, I've seen people get deported because they didn't hire a lawyer because they thought it was just forms. Maybe they made a mistake on their form and now they're being deported and they don't have any defenses. So it's definitely not just, and even if it was, this is your freedom that we're talking about. This is like immigration is not just about getting a green card and staying here. It's also a legacy issue because if you can secure your status, then you can potentially petition for other family members to come here too. Or in the alternative, you can secure a better position in America where you're working a better job, maybe a better paying job that allows you to send more money back home to really help the community that you left behind. So it's definitely not filling out forms. And that's the biggest trap that I see people fall into.
Yeah, I mean, the DIY craze has definitely taken over with a lot of these things. And not that, I mean, there are a lot of things that I think people can certainly do on their own, but I do believe also that they are overestimating their ability to handle these things, right? And so the problem is like what can be avoided, like information that you need to avoid so that they're not falling into these things like getting deported. Or I unfortunately know somebody who traveled out. They didn't have their papers to stay here, right? They traveled outside of the country and to visit a sick family member, and they were not able to come back. And so they have a business here, they have family here, they have property here. And so had they not taken things into their own hand and maybe spoken to an immigration attorney, that they would have been able to maybe avoid some of those pitfalls, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I see that happen all the time. And I always tell people, even if you think that you're confident enough to do your immigration case on your own, still meet with an immigration attorney because there might be blind spots that you didn't think about.
Right.
Like I had a consultation with someone one time who she qualified for a green card through her kid, but because she came to the US illegally twice, she was actually subject to a permanent bar that would prevent her from getting that green card.
Wow.
So, you know, you don't know certain things, and a lot of it is based in the law that people don't really know. People know, for example, if you marry a US citizen, it's easier for you to get a green card, but they don't know that the law still requires that you came here legally and you don't have any other issues. So people get into trouble all the time because they maybe know a friend of a friend who knows a little bit about immigration and they kind of go based on that. But immigration law is constantly changing, especially in the last 5 years.
Right.
And so it's still worth it to speak with an immigration attorney, even if you feel like you can handle your case on your own.
Yeah, it's almost like tax law, right? How is it like dependent on like, you know, is it politically motivated, like depending on who's in office is how the laws change? Not so
Yes
much.
and no.
Okay.
So, I mean, we definitely saw with immigration, we've seen that a little bit. Like, so we have DACA because President Obama, issued an executive order to allow that.
Okay.
And then we saw also that the Trump administration tried to get rid of it because it wasn't law, it was an executive order. And we saw how many other things the Trump administration tried to do that, the Biden administration is reversing and things like that. So it is kind of tied to who's in office, unfortunately. And part of that is because, Congress, regardless of the administration, doesn't want to do their job and just update these super old immigration laws.
Right. So you talked about a little bit about relationships, marrying people to get a green card. And that, as far as I know, that's like been my biggest exposure to immigration law, because I always hear about people doing these type of things. Is it still possible to do that? And what are the challenges or the pitfalls that people can find themselves in?
Sure. So people still are able to get green cards through marriage. It's the easiest way I don't want to say it's the easiest way. People think it's the easiest way because if you're married to a US citizen, for example, there are a lot of things that you can quote unquote like get away with that other people could not. So for example, if you come here with a visitor's visa and then you overstay, but you're married to a US citizen, you can get your green card here. You don't need a waiver. Like you don't need, it isn't really that complicated, pretty much. Whereas, other situations might mean that you got to leave the country to get your green card. And some people don't want to take that chance. So as long as it's a valid marriage, like, so you can't say, I need a green card, let me go marry this person. Or
Right.
I want a green card, let me pay this person like $20,000 for the marriage to get the green card. That's illegal. Can't do that. But as long as you guys are, you met each other, fell in love and all that stuff, absolutely you can still get a green card. The pitfall that I see people falling into a lot now is that, the same thing. Oh, it's just filling out forms. I don't really need an attorney. And it's not the forms. Where I'm seeing people get tripped up at now is at the interview. So the form packet, the application packet could be flawless, but because you're not prepared for the interview, you don't know what the officer is asking you. Or sometimes I'll see people, again, not using an attorney, going to the interview on their own. And sometimes, depending on the officer, they'll take advantage of you with that because they think that you don't know what's going on, you're not prepared, you're by yourself, you don't know that the officer's not allowed to ask you certain questions. And then because you're not prepared, you might freak out. You might feel like you need to answer whatever's asked and not feel like you can stick up for yourself. And before you know it, the officer is either denying your case or, even worse off, misinterpreting things and saying that, this is a fraudulent marriage and now you're screwed for life.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. That is interesting. So your recommendation is that if someone is going to apply for, if they are going to apply to have their spouse, come into the country or to get married, to get citizenship, that they absolutely get an attorney to represent them in that interview.
Definitely. And even if you maybe DIY'd it and now you're preparing for the interview, have a consultation with an attorney and, just tell them, hey, my interview's coming up. What are some things that I should be aware of? Or what are some things that I should bring with me to the interview to prove the validity of my marriage and things like that.
Okay.
And the other thing too, immigration, everything is taking forever. It's taking an average of like 13 and a half months for most applications for green cards to be processed. Sometimes we have to call immigration and yell at them and get them moving on our case. Sometimes that's like a 90-minute hold until you're waiting to speak to someone. If you get an attorney, they can do that. Like, do you really want to spend 90 minutes of your time on hold just to be told like whatever? Or would you rather an attorney handle that for you so that you can spend time with your loved ones, binging Squid Game on Netflix, like doing something other than, being on hold for your immigration case?
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Leave it to the experts because especially since you know what to ask, like how to navigate the system and sort of make sure that you're not saying the wrong things as well. And what about I know there's a lot of people who come on visas for business to work here. What does that look like if someone wanted to come here in order to work or get a work visa?
So there are a variety of options to come in for work visas. I don't really handle employment immigration, but there are visas. The most common one is the H-1B visa, which is good for people that want to work at different companies, like think Facebook, Google, like they rely on these visas a lot. And as long as a job requires a minimum of a bachelor's degree and they can prove that they need to hire you because they can't find any other Americans or people that already have work authorization to work in it, then you're able to get this visa to come to the US for a maximum of 6 years and you can work here. And then beyond that 6 years, if the company wants to keep you, then they would need to apply for you to get a green card. So there are definitely a lot of options where you can get a temporary work visa to come here, or you can have the company just flat out petition for you to get a green card. It just depends on what their goals are, what your goals are, and what makes the most sense.
Okay. And how are things now after you have gone through your struggles and sort of made it the long haul? They say, I think if it's after 5 years, you're sort of on the right track. How are you experiencing running a practice now?
I think now I just have a new set of challenges. So before it was just by myself. And now that I have a team, the challenges are just making sure that I'm delegating to them, not handling everything on my own. I'm like a crazy, like, control freak Virgo. So being able to like trust my team, and they're amazing. It's really more me than them.
Okay.
Just making sure that I'm delegating to them to give them enough work to do so that I'm not driving myself crazy. So that's the newest challenge, just making sure that I'm delegating, making sure that, business is still coming in because I got to pay these people because they got to eat. So
Right.
just a new set of challenges.
Yeah, I totally agree. As you grow, that's the new challenge because you're so used to doing it all on your own. Now you sort of have to let go of the vine, as they say. And I even look back, and when I'm looking through like old files or looking through our system, I'm like, how did I do all this stuff on my own? It's like crazy. But
Yeah.
it's a good challenge to have, delegating to people. It's definitely necessary
Yes.
though. Hmm.
Absolutely. Yes. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I look at it more so just when I reflect on how far I've come. And
Hmm.
like, if you told me that 7 years in, I would, have a team, be doing what I love,
Right.
um, I would have thought that you're crazy. So, I mean, I'm here, it's like God gets all the glory. And, I
Amen.
went through all that. I feel like in a way, everything I went through was him testing me to be like, you sure you want this life? Like, you sure you about this life?
Right.
And that's how I feel like I had to go through like an initiation to get to where I am now. And as much as it was tough and I hated it, like I don't think I changed my journey one bit.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love that. Definitely feels like initiation. Definitely feels like you had to want it to get here. So I totally agree with you. Bianca, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining me. How can people find you if they want to use your services for your firm, or if you're speaking anywhere? How can they find you?
Sure. So my law firm is Brazen Legal. So you can go to brazenlegal.com to learn more about me and my law firm. And I'm on social media at Brazen Lawyer. I'm pretty much Brazen Lawyer everywhere, but I hang out the most on Instagram.
Okay, awesome. All right, Bianca, thank you so much. And we'll be in touch. We'll not be strangers like we have been.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Because I've been following all the stuff that you're doing too, and it's like always amazing, and
Thank
you're
you.
very inspiring. I'm like, oh my God, Sabine just did this awesome thing. I need to step my own game up. So I love what you're doing too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate